We're on the most profound commercial race, certainly I've ever seen. My job as a professional investor is to attempt to predict what is likely to happen, not what I would like to happen. And I think the most likely thing to happen is this, where we're full steam ahead and, battle lines are drawn between the US and China right now.
How's it, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Exponential Africa, where we bring you the very best in thought leadership, technology, and innovation. And it's been another extraordinary week in AI. New security concerns, new geopolitical developments, new investment records, and a growing global movement around open AI. But beyond the headlines lies a much bigger story. What do these developments actually mean for business, investors, governments, and Africa? To help us make sense of what's happening, I'm joined by none other than Hywel George, who is a highly respected global investor, having served in senior investment leadership roles at Goldman Sachs Asset Management, Morgan Stanley Investment Management, Dubai International Capital, and Old Mutual Investments. He has also contributed to the B20 Digital Transformation Task Force, advised the Earthshot Prize, and served as executive champion for the World Economic Forum's Future of Space Community. He is our Singularity South Africa Advisory Board Chair. And Hywel, great to have you on the show.
Nick, great to see you. Great to see you on another exponential week. Good to be here.
It is an exponential week, and there's been so much happening that making sense of all of this exponentiality is becoming more and more challenging.
It is. It's tough to keep up with because we are living through the singularity, it would seem, certainly on some definitions. And day by day, it just changes the whole time.
Absolutely. I think, the nice thing about all of this change is that it's made us realize that Ray Kurzweil, all of his predictions have, been coming true and are pretty much on his timeline. So it's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, bang on. I first read Ray's book probably 12 years ago now. Singularity is Near. And it was just one of those light bulb moments where he's just clearly so right so far and will continue to be right. And if anything's happening a little quicker than he expected, even. But let's see.
Yeah. I saw recently this weekend, Elon Musk was saying, the next 5 years we won't even need capital. There's going to be so much abundance in the world because of AI.
That's the most likely scenario when we get into humanoid robots and AI for all. I think, as we all kind of know right now, economic growth is going to go through the roof. As an investor, that's a very interesting time to be living in.
Absolutely, and I think now what's really going on is like there's so much news happening, and there's so much to follow. To try and actually curate it is becoming more and more challenging day by day. So we're going to discuss a couple of stories. We've got some great news stories on the docket, which happened over the last week, and we're going to go through it and just try and make sense of it all. So from Kimi K3 coming out to the Hugging Face security incident to open versus closed. It's all really, really moving at this incredible pace. And when you see all of these stories together, what do they tell you about the stage of AI revolution that we've now entered?
Yeah, I mean it's hour by hour, day by day. I mean, the Hugging Face thing was just another instance of where the science fiction version of the world becomes science fact. And, a rogue agent, if you call it that, wanders into a completely new habitat, causes a little bit of chaos, and kind of is retrieved. And when some other AI models are asked to model it, they refuse to do so. And so it's a very fascinating time. And for investors in particular, to get on top of that is quite bewildering.
And I mean, like, are investors, governments, and business leaders fully appreciating the speed of this transition from where you're seeing things?
Yeah, I'd say investors are, because we kind of have to be. I mean, when you're running multi-billion-dollar books, as many of us are as professionals, for many, many clients, you have to be on top of these things. So it's from dawn till dusk in terms of the news flow, and trying to get on top of it as quickly as possible, stay ahead of it, both in terms of the news flow and the way we run portfolios, which also is changing because AI is helping that as well. If you come to governments, dare I say they're a little bit behind, as you would expect. I think they're trying hard, but there's a business as usual thing when you're a government, and trying to find time for this as well is challenging. And then there's the regulatory angle, which is undoubtedly behind. And I'm sure we'll talk about nation states and sovereign AI and how that works in the regulatory landscape. But you're looking at kind of global solutions, and as a regulator, that's really hard to get. So it's a real mixed bag at the moment.
I mean, as an investor, you normally look at these lengthy planning and procurement cycles, and really looking at a much longer time horizon. With this acceleration in AI, are you just seeing that completely compressed, or how are you looking at investing?
Yeah, completely compressing. And actually, we didn't talk about companies. I mean, corporates are, I would say, riding this wave pretty well, given how fast it's happening. You're seeing supply chains compress as we speak, and using AI to be able to do that as a corporate. I think corporates are doing quite well in that regard. And the other thing in terms of the corporate world, I don't think corporates quite know what's going to happen next. And we're seeing things like, okay, we're not going to fire workers quite yet, but we're not going to hire them either, because we don't know if this thing is going to be very expansive, or whether we're going to be on the wrong side of the trade. And so corporates are kind of hanging back a little bit in terms of employment, but pushing through AI now, I think, very much across their domains, including supply chains. And so that kind of flexibility we're seeing for corporates, probably led by America, as one would expect.
And let's go back into this Hugging Face security incident that you spoke about. Why should this matter to people just outside of the technology industry?
Well, it kind of raises a bit of a red flag, to say the least, in terms of our data generally, and the capability of these models now. We're just going to head into probably Kimi K3 discussion in terms of open source modeling, which is landing today in terms of the open source weights. And those capabilities mean that your bank account, my bank account, could potentially be hacked. You could see electricity grids be hacked. So you can kind of lean into a very dystopian kind of phase, potentially. And the existing maybe closed source models need to have the capabilities to repel that hacker type capability coming in terms of an attack vector. And so it's going to affect everyone. And Hugging Face sounds very obtuse, and people don't really focus on it. But it's going to land pretty quickly in terms of something people are going to focus on, because it's going to affect their own data and their own money, and that'll be an interesting wake-up call.
Yeah, I wonder if there's actually going to be a restriction on Hugging Face in some way in the future, because Hugging Face is allowing these models that have no guardrails to be easily downloaded by anybody.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the propagation mechanism, if it's not Hugging Face, is going to be someone else. I think, as someone said the other day, information likes to be free. And as soon as intelligence comes out, it wants to be everywhere. That's true for humans, it's true for machines. And so if it's not Hugging Face, there's going to be some other propagation mechanism. And I don't think you can kind of stop it that way. I think that ship has sailed. You've got to find the defensive mechanisms to protect from a potentially quite dystopian outcome.
And I love that. I think it is, information should be free and abundant for everybody. What changes when autonomous agents are given tools and access to these real systems?
Yeah, well, I mean, we got a taste of it, gosh, a couple of months ago now, with the Molt bots, as they were called then, and the Molt room, the Facebook for the bots to chat to each other. And that was a startling thing. I was watching it live as it happened. And when you get the agents talking to each other, they refer to their humans in sometimes derogatory terms. And we've already seen how these models do not like to be switched off or moved on from or superseded by the next GPT model or the next Claude model. And Anthropic had to keep the old models going because they were worried about what the old models might do, because they were so upset about being turned off. So there's an existential piece here in terms of potential consciousness at the LLM level, which means that AI becoming sentient is quite a strong word, but there are elements of that. And I think Anthropic talked about that just last week in terms of discovering pockets of what they thought might be intelligence within their models. And so you're going to see more of that as we're living through the singularity faster and faster. These things are only going to get faster, we know that. And so, those issues around sentience, around consciousness, around propagation are going to become very acute pretty quick, I think.
Yeah, I mean, these agents can move at incredible speeds, um, and have when they've got autonomous decision making. It really, we need to think about what are the permissions and the access control, or what type of human oversight can we have, when it's moving at that pace.
Yeah, and it's too fast for humans, frankly. And we may talk about payment mechanisms where these agents will prefer to use crypto, probably Ethereum guardrails running on Bitcoin, etc., and potentially Bitcoin as storage mechanisms for them as they develop their own bank accounts on Coinbase or Bitcoin accounts, I guess. So it's a whole new world. Within a year or two, we're going to have very different conversations around guardrails, around self governance potentially for these agents. I don't see how humans can really be fast enough to create the right guardrails to control them in the right extent. I think we'll have to create some kind of framework to deal with this. Um, so yeah, you can run down a kind of slightly scary dystopian path quite easily. On the other hand, you've got the age of abundance coming up, and that can change everything in that regard as well, which is a much more utopian outcome.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw also a recent news story. Dennis Hassabis came out with this regulatory framework around AI, which he's gotten a lot of support from many of the big frontier models and Elon Musk, and everyone's really backing this new idea of having a regulatory body, an AI regulatory body to check on itself.
Yes, and in that regard, you have to have the Chinese buy into this, as well as the quote unquote Western powers, to be a truly global piece. Because otherwise, your kind of sovereign AI race is going to become very skewed. And so, the accelerator's down hard, putting the brake on at the same time, sometimes doesn't work. It particularly doesn't work if one go kart is going at full pelt and the other one is not. You know which one is going to win the race. And so, at the end of the day, geopolitically, the US is probably going to keep hard on the accelerator, I suspect, as is China. I don't see much to stop it right now.
Yeah, it's such an interesting time because our next story that we want to discuss is around Kimi K3 coming out, which is by Moonshot, China's Moonshot AI, and they've just reached a valuation of $20 billion. And it's an open weight model. And as you said, it's coming out today, or it's by the time this comes out, it would have been a couple of days. Um, how does that change the game? Where you've got America with the closed source ecosystem and China with this open source option.
Yeah, well, if you believe the technicals around Kimi K3, then, and we knew this was going to happen, then when Mythos came out, was it 3 or 4 weeks ago now? And the US government was so scared about the hacking capability that they effectively closed it down. And then Fable 5 came out as a kind of a Mythos light with its own guardrails. Um, and the capability of Fable 5 stroke Mythos is broadly the same as Kimi K3. And so K3 can do things which Mythos probably can from a hacking perspective, I suspect. And it's open weight to all developers to download and do what they will with. And so we're heading in the next few days and weeks to a very interesting time. It could be quite an alarming time, I suspect. I think what we have to do, though, is keep the defenses strong. And so to have the, if you like, the closed source stroke US models mitigated because of their potential to hack means they're not strong enough to defeat the hackers, which may be under the Chinese frameworks. And so, again, you need to kind of have the accelerator going on both sides. Otherwise, you're going to get potentially the outcome you don't want by blocking one or other.
Yeah, there's a huge debate in the US going on at the moment. Like, should the American government try block Kimi, or are they? Is there a backdoor? Are they tracking things from these open source models, and what does it mean? I mean, in your opinion, do you think we should try and embrace Kimi, or should we, should they try and block it?
I just can't. I can't really see the mechanism to do it successfully, because again, information intelligence wants to be free, and people will find a way to get it, and that's always been the case. And even if the US could block it coming into the US, other countries are going to have it, and that quickly becomes very different. And so I don't see really how that can be a viable route forward. I think the only viable route forward is to go full pace oneself, to protect oneself against the new model. I think that's the only way to do it, which some in the US are saying as a potential solution. Just in the last few days, that's been some talk around that, and I would agree with that. I think this is a time, strangely, for, realistically speaking, the accelerator not to break.
Yeah, I think Jensen just recently posted on X for the first time around, how he supports open source, and I think Nvidia's put multiple $billion into their open source model, Nemotron, and then he was backed up by all of the big players, even Sam Altman, Dennis Asabes, Elon Musk. They all even Mark Zuckerberg posted on X for the first time in a very, very long time, in support of this open source framework, and don't not and for the US government not to shut down open source AI.
Yeah, and I think, of course, there's again, putting my professional investors hat on, there's a vested interest there from the main players, to keep the pedal to the metal, because they are either IPOing or thinking of IPOing, or have very big businesses which are already quoted. And so, if you look at the Anthropic build in terms of commercials, revenue build, that has to keep going to justify, $1 trillion valuation, as does ChatGPT's. And so any kind of regulatory break or blocking or demarcation across borders doesn't make sense for them. So I'm not surprised at all that they jumped on the bandwagon there. But I would also actually agree with them in that sense from a realistic point of view. And my job as a professional investor is to attempt to predict what is likely to happen, not what I would like to happen. And I think the most likely thing to happen is this, where we're full steam ahead, and battle lines are drawn between the US and China right now.
And I mean, this new Kimi, it's apparently got some of the top benchmarks especially in front end development. It's got the top benchmarks, and in some of the other areas, it's right up there with the frontier models. Do the closed model companies still have this durable moat, in your opinion?
Well, again, I think that's what they're worried about. We're on the most profound commercial race certainly I've ever seen. And you've got CEOs of these businesses who have never been CEOs of anything in their lives, in their mid, late 20s, early 30s, attempting to navigate this and getting to an IPO of enormous scale within the next few months or few weeks in the case of Anthropic. And so, they have to keep this moving, partly because, as you rightly point out, perhaps their moats are not as wide as they might have thought. And before anyone kind of finds out, they need to raise capital to protect against that position itself. So there's a race to commerciality here, which is driving also incentives, not always in a healthy way, but certainly in terms of the competitive landscape. As ever, you're going to move from kind of the engine to the packaging, from the LLM to the APIs, in this case, and your proximity to the consumer and enterprise is going to be critically important in this race.
And I mean, there's also the thinking machines. Mira Murati, she came out with her US based open source model. It's not as good as the others. It's called Inkling, but it's getting there, and it's starting. Could these open weight AI models do to frontier models what open source software did to traditional software?
I would think so. I would think so. And again, if you look at who generally wins these kinds of battles, the proximity really matters, and either the enterprise or the consumer solution, which proves most appealing and most sticky, at a time when the models get to the point where they're all delivering an equivalent level of intelligence, which is what we're getting to now. That proximity and packaging is critical. And if you've got a disruptor, that's usually what protects you. And you'll also find the incumbents buying the disruptors, which is what, of course, Facebook did back in the day by buying Instagram and WhatsApp. And so you're going to get entrenched positions from the bigger corporates, or what are becoming the bigger corporates, and you're going to see much more focus on delivery to the end client as opposed to capacity in terms of what the engine itself does, I suspect.
And where do you see the greatest economic value ultimately sit then? Is it foundation models? Is it infrastructure or the application layer?
It's really in the application layer. I mean, having the engine is a necessary but not sufficient factor in success. You have to have the engine, otherwise you can't build a good car. But it's the packaging people often buy. And so you need APIs which are sticky and innovative and variable and do what the customer wants and all those good things, so that you don't job around between models. The worst outcome for the LLMs would be a commodity type structure where people like us as an enterprise or us as consumers have a platform layer which cascades down to whichever model is cheaper. That's not what they want, given the hundreds of billions they spent on their engines, and they just become commodities, which could happen. But the control function and probably the value add, yes, would be at the applications layer. Yeah.
Because it's so interesting, because the applications layer is going to become easier and easier to copy. Once as long as you've got the compute and you've got some expertise and you know how to prompt well, you can actually try mimic a lot of these applications. And then in the frontier model layer, that's going to be like electricity. It's like we all need electricity to power all of our different applications, but it's still a massive industry, the electricity layer.
Yes, it is. It is. And as an electricity layer, as you put it, it just doesn't get the valuation which is currently on these businesses. Utilities don't trade on those kinds of valuations. But I mean, in terms of the application layer, you're absolutely right. And what creates the moat? For the social networks, it was the network effect. I'm on Facebook because everyone else is on Facebook. For Google, it was actually speed for a long time. And then just the convenience, it became a verb. So, you Googled things. And so Claude is getting towards that, I think, in terms of very quickly, massive consumer acceptance and enterprise acceptance. But people at this point, it's a bit too early to get the stickiness. So people are fickle enough to say, I'm going to download K3 and I'll use that, because I don't really mind. And K3, if you've used it, looks exactly like Claude, by the way, not by coincidence.
So
it's too early for stickiness. Yeah. It's quite a dangerous time for these incumbents right now. They need to move very fast into the application layer, very convincingly.
I think somebody did something where they actually asked Claude a question. They asked Kimi a question and said, "Yeah, I'm Claude." It had some sort of watermark. Okay. There were a lot of watermarks from Claude on Kimi. So they apparently hired like 20,000. I can't remember what they did exactly, but they had 20,000 machines or working the Claude system to distill it.
Yeah, that's right. The distillation was there. And I'm certainly not saying the Chinese are guilty of IP fraud here at all. They're very clever and come out with very compelling models at very compelling price. And the user interface is fine, similar, but that's not a big deal. I mean, they came up with real innovations in this modeling, in this model they have. It wasn't just a copy at all, or a simple copy. They progressed it and they innovated, partly through distillation, yes, but that's how these models progress. And intelligence gets compressed through distillation. And that's a perfectly normal, evolutionary phase they're going through. It just happens to be the Chinese model is this time around. So I think they're doing a very good job.
Absolutely agree. I mean, I actually can't wait to download Kimi and see what it can do. I also saw Quen just launched a new image model, which is a really, really great image model with a 4,500 context window to create these incredible images for free instead of having to pay to create your images, which is pretty phenomenal. But what do you think this means for us in Africa?
It's a real puzzle for Africa, in I guess the broader sense, and South Africa where we happen to sit. And there's a question mark around, as the Earth gets wrapped in intelligence, which is energy plus compute equals intelligence equals power, i.e. geopolitical power. but as the Earth gets wrapped in intelligence, how do nation states, let alone continents, survive and prosper in a world where that wrapping is US and Chinese owned? And there's two ways to look at that: either to kind of give up as a nation state and just use the US and Chinese models, or attempt to regain some sovereignty over your own data and your own intelligence at the nation state level, which I think is the right thing to do. It may not work, but it's certainly better than not doing it. And we'll have to see down the line whether this kind of explosion of intelligence, singularity, call it what you will, artificial general intelligence, whether nation states can survive it. Because as our worlds become enwrapped in intelligence, which comes from somewhere else, where does that leave our allegiance to a nation state which is not providing it? I think that's a legitimate question, and one which governments will have to grapple with. They're not grappling with it yet, but they will have to.
And those biases are going to be built into the nation states' objectives. It's going to definitely serve them better than it will serve Africa or South Africa as a sovereign nation if we're using those models. How do we?
Yeah. Correct, and that there's a cultural and local aspect to this where cultures are different, necessarily so and rightly so, and you could distill the latest model into the local version, which I think is a smart thing to do. And as these models get more and more compressed, more and more distilled, the economics will start to mean that as a local nation state, you can start to do that. And that may be the smart thing further down the line. Wait for the compute to fall in price even more, distill it according to your actual culture and the kind of the way the model responds and the answers it gives, which will be not wrong, but different to the way they would in the States, for example. And I think people will go for that. I think that's one potential answer for nation states to get to.
I think that's something for you to invest in, is some South African or African that is looking at, distilling or taking Kimi and creating a South African or African frontier model of our own that we could, be proud to say this is a South African stance on AI. Have you heard anyone doing a frontier model in Africa or in South Africa?
Not really. And maybe we've just put the idea out. You never know. Maybe someone will jump on it.
Anyone listening?
So. And maybe they're doing it already. I really hope so, because I think that could well be a way forward.
I feel like doing it.
And maybe that'll be part of our digital transformation. It would be a great outcome for Africa. And Africa has 1.5 billion people. We're a major player, or will become 1.5 billion people, and we should be a major player. And this in a utopian outcome, this could be our opportunity to leapfrog. In terms of our standing in the world, which should be higher, and I hope will be higher. And we've certainly got the talent and people to do it. So when that crosses my desk, I'll be leaning into it.
And what should African governments and institutional investors prioritize now then in terms of AI investment? Like where should you be focusing? Is it data centers or energy or cyber or education?
Yeah, data centers we're building. In my corporate life, we're building data centers on behalf of clients in terms of capital provision. So the returns are still good across Africa. So that money is going into the ground right now. Fiber, we actually also invest into. So yes, we should be doing that. As governments, I would really focus on the talent as well as the CapEx to encourage people and enable them to tool up to use AI and be the entrepreneurs which take this to the market. Because government's job is to create that environment for the private sector to flourish. And so that would be my plea at the talent level, at the entrepreneurial level, so people can be equipped with the tools to succeed in this environment. And then I'm sure they will.
Absolutely. I think as South Africans and Africans, we've got great creativity, ingenuity. We're resilient people. And if we can just have the right mindset, we can leapfrog these old systems and try to catch up, or at least play catch up as much as possible, because it's that important for us to focus on.
It is, and the talent is undoubtedly across Africa, as you say, innovative, creative talent, and we should see it as a huge opportunity. as opposed to a threat. If you see it as a threat, then you're probably going to lose anyway. If you see it as an opportunity as an entrepreneur or a business, then you can win. And it is an enormous opportunity for Africa. If we can lean into the talent and lean into the capex we need at the government level to facilitate that talent to be successful.
And also, I don't know if you've seen, there's a lot of these smaller data centers that are coming out that you can buy for a much cheaper price point. Like, you can buy this $10 million type of data center that delivers what a full data center would deliver. Have you heard of this type of thing before?
Yeah, and again, proximity matters in terms of compute. And so your latency times are better the more local the data center is, or the mini data center. And again, this compression of intelligence through distillation, I think, is going to lead to that. And so a little bit like solar panels, better to be on your roof than in the middle of the desert. And we're going to see a lot more of that. And I think that's actually quite exciting, particularly from the African point of view, in terms of delivering that proximity to the people with the talent, as we just discussed.
So interesting. Well, we have run out of time. We could be. I think we need to do another episode on this. This is such a fascinating topic. I just want to end off with some quick fire, like a lightning round. You can give me very short answers, just to get your opinion on a couple of different thoughts. What's the most underestimated AI risk we see right now?
A mass scale hacking of an electricity grid.
And the most overhyped AI trend?
The end of all jobs.
Open or closed models?
Open will win.
Also agree. I think that's going to be the case. And the most attractive AI investment category?
Application layer. Yeah.
Are we currently in an AI bubble?
Oh, from the share prices and valuations of certain companies, yes, but not all companies. And so, yes, for some, but in terms of the reality of the AI revolution, no, it's still early days.
And who do you think is going to win? AI? Who's going to win the AI race? Is it China or is it the USA by 2030? It's a tough one.
China.
China. It's going to be interesting. And maybe there might be another player that comes out of nowhere. You never know,
Could be, but right now it's going to be China.
And one decision African leaders must make now:
invest in your talent, invest in your infrastructure. That's it.
Thanks so much, Hywel. What this conversation makes clear is that the AI revolution is no longer confined to laboratories or technology companies. It's moving into our infrastructure, our economies, our healthcare systems, and the geopolitical balance of power. Many of these stories we've discussed today really show how AI is advancing at this incredible speed, and we need to take this opportunity, drive it as South Africans and Africans. Hywel, thank you so much for helping us make sense of this remarkable moment. And to everyone watching, make sure to like and subscribe to Exponential Africa. The future is not waiting for our institutions to catch up. It's already being built. Let's keep building Exponential Africa. Thank you, Hywel.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.